Well, hi everyone. We'll go ahead and get going. Welcome. I just wanted to say, as well for today, but any of our meetings, if there's a particular chapter or chapters you'd like me to focus on, as I was kind of looking this morning, thinking, what to what chapter or chapters to explore. Um, I just sort of felt, I could go to any of them and. Um, in one sense, it doesn't really matter. But particularly given that, if there's particular ones that are standing out to you or you have some questions about and you'd like to kind of have me unpack together with you all, just let me know because I'm happy to, you know, take requests, as they say in the musical world. So um, I thought about looking at a chapter it's on the paperback edition, it's the chapter Two Worlds, the described and the experienced, and maybe explore that one today. It's a little longer chapter. There's a lot in there, but it's pretty central to, um, yeah. Um, I sometimes, when I'm introducing my work to folks, I make this distinction between these two worlds, which strangely enough are not two worlds, but are so divergent in the way reality seems to be from these two kind of broad perspectives that um, I thought I would highlight that. Okay. And yeah, this is page 19 in the paperback book. I don't know in the Kindle version if you have that. Can you hear me all right? Okay, good. From the perspective of what we what could be called the seemingly describable world. Um, I say seemingly because yeah, I've got all these descriptions. We have all these descriptions for where we are, what we're doing, who other people are, what the world is, right? But I call it the seemingly describable world because it does seem to be describable, and the question is it ultimately describable? And that's the essence of really my work, we could say. From the perspective of the seemingly describable world, I'm sitting in a room and the room has a ceiling and a floor, walls, and so on, right? That's my room. It's got a ceiling, it's got a floor, it's got walls. I mean, no question about it, right? That's what I mean by there's sort of no doubt in one sense about these descriptions. But these things that I'm calling a room, the activity of sitting and being a person who is doing the sitting are are known are only known as experience. This thing called sitting is an experience that is the interpretive mind calls sitting, right? And as experience, these phenomena have no top or bottom to them, no walls, no boundaries. In other words, unlike the room I at one level seem able to know and describe as being circumscribed, in other words, it's contained, right? The room is contained. It has got a boundary around it. My experience is without bounds. It's not circumscribed. So if you're sitting in a room, I imagine you're in some kind of room, some kind of setting, right? Feel this right now that the experience that you and I may be calling a room where you are right now, as experience, you don't find any top to the experience, do you? Just feel that. Or bottom. Isn't that amazing? If you go, even if you try to go up in space, so to speak, spatially speaking, in experience, just go ahead and see if you find a top to your experience or bottom. You feel how open-ended it is. It's a striking difference, isn't it? In the seemingly describable world, there are insides and outsides to things. There's what's inside of me and what's outside of me, inside of the body, outside of the body, right? But because there's nothing outside of experience, talking about an inside or outside makes no sense. There's just experience that we can never get outside of, right? So here's your experience. Feel your experience. I say this all the time. Sorry about being a broken record about feeling experience, but it's one of the simplest, more straightforward way I could point to this. Um, to feel the presence of your experience, which you are feeling, but just notice the feeling of the moment, this moment of experiencing. We could call it experiencing. And notice that it's all you find. In other words, that's what I mean. There's nothing outside of it. There's nothing other than experience that you could possibly ever find or locate. You could in your mind, you could in an idea, in an abstraction, that there's an outside of experience. Like here's experience, like a bubble of experiencing or a whatever, a field of experiencing, and then there's another something on the other side of that. But and you can imagine that. And of course, the imagination of something outside of your experience would be what? More experience. And if you were to somehow find a way to get outside of your experience to actually empirically come in contact with the evidence of something outside of your experience, and now not just as a theoretical notion that there's something outside, but actually encounter the outside of your experience, now what?
Hello.
More experience,
Hi.
right? You can't get outside of experience. In that sense, there is in the notions of inside and outside, you see, like I remember, numerous times, engaging with different meditations and yoga practices and the like, and hearing the instructor, the one doing the guiding, saying something like, "Now I want you to invite you to go inside," right? Like go inside, and it didn't really occur to me at the time, but it definitely occurs to me now. Like I don't know what that means. Go inside. What does that mean? When there is no inside or outside. You see? It's kind of wild, isn't it? In the described world, forgive me, I have this dual task of what I'm doing with the reading and then letting people in the Zoom, so forgive me. In the described world, there's an individual, a me, right? I can describe me, this individual, existing in and separate from what is not me. Here I am, and there's something that's not me, something outside of me, namely the world outside of me. I exist in the world, right? Feel experience, however, and you don't find an individual separate from a world. You just find experience, right? Okay, so here I am. How do I know I'm here? Because there's experience of what I call me. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to go outside of me, presumably the world outside there. How do I know that world? I know it as experience. There's just a continuum of experiencing, isn't there? No boundary. You might say, well, there's an experience of an individual and then there's an experience of the world, and those are separate experiences. But as experience, you don't find a clear edge separating the experience of you from the experience of not you. What you find is a continuum of experiencing, as I was just saying. You feel that edgelessness of experiencing? Feel the seamless nature of the experiential field. No seams, no seams dividing one thing from another in the fabric of reality. Feel the seamless nature of the experiential field and how distinct it is from the sense of being an individual living in and navigating a world. Let yourself enjoy that perspective, the feeling of no boundaries, no lines, no seams in the fabric of experience. Just this, a seamless, undivided whole. Yeah, Ed, you wanted to share something or ask something?
Yeah, when you say experience,
Yeah.
you're referring to all the different senses, all the different ways we experience, and the different senses give different information, and where what seems visually divided may not be orally divided. And so, what do you point to when you say
Yeah. Really, I'm glad you asked that. So, this is one of the, at times, trickier aspects of this sort of exploration, and that is we're starting at what's the term? Kind of first principles. We're not assuming in this exploration of the experiential, if you will, view, and I'll get to what I mean by experiencing in a sec. The start from the from not knowing anything, okay? So in other words, yes, we already have all these categories. That's the describable world, that there even is something called a sensory senses, right? The five senses. That's an idea. I'm not refuting the idea per se. It's a valid perspective, but it's a description of something that's present, okay? So something called the visual field, we have a description for the visual field is present as what? It's present as experience. So is the auditory field, so called. That's present as experience. And they show up very distinct from one another, identifiably so, right? Here's sound, the sound of my voice, and then there's a visual field that's also here, right? Along with the sounds. But both of those are showing up as and only ever known as what we could call experience. It's just a word, and the word experience, as I'm using it, refers to the sheer existence or presence of what's appearing. That's experience. With no assumptions of being able to slot what's being experienced into these different categories, these different descriptive categories. We can do that. We already know how to do that. We're very trained up in doing that, describing and categorizing, and it's fine. It's just one way to encounter this. Another way is to go back to experience itself, which all the descriptions are supposedly referring to. And this is really the essence of, this exploration is discovering that while there may be arguably some correspondence between the descriptions and what the descriptions are referring to in terms of experience, there's a myriad other ways where there's zero correspondence. I was pointing that out as the idea of there being a room. The actual experience doesn't have any correspondence because in the experience that we're calling a room, there is no top, no bottom, no inside, no outside. So all those categories of description, which are valid in a sense from within that described frame of reference, they don't hold when you look at what's actually present experientially. So what we're exploring is the non-conceptual, essentially. So
it's
I'm not saying like tune into your senses because the senses is an abstraction.
but when you're using the words like top, bottom, ceiling, that refers to a certain sense. And I mean, it's
Well, we have
usually
an idea of something called a top, right? And the top of my room descriptively is the ceiling. That's the top of it, conventionally speaking. It's
that
got a
you,
top, it's got a bottom, it's got sides, it's got dimensions to it, right?
but that you see as opposed to feel. I can't feel the ceiling. I can't.
Sure you can. You could reach up with your hand and feel it. You could touch it, right?
I'm not that tall.
If you had a ladder or whatever. So, but this is the thing is that I mean, even when you can actually, like, people will say this, well, what you're saying, there's no wall there. So like I can bump up against the wall and there it is. It's concretely present, right? But the experience of this solid object is not solid. The experience is not solid. The experience is, well, I can't really say what it is, which is what's so remarkable. It's something, call it a flow of energy, but that doesn't capture it either. That's just more concepts, but it maybe gets a little bit more to the primal indescribability of it, the root of it, the basis of it. Yeah. So yeah, so I'm using, to come back to your original question about experience, it's just a word to to talk about what's here. I have an idea that what's here is a room with a human sitting in it, but what's here is experience. Does that clarifying at all the difference between the two?
Yeah, I kind of get it, but when I'm trying to perform your exercises,
Mhm.
I tend to favor one sense over another sense, or I'm not taking in the full experience, you could say. I'm channeling it, or and then I'm, well, is there a ceiling? Well, I see a ceiling. I don't feel a
No,
ceiling.
you don't see a ceiling. You see something that the interpretive mind describes as a ceiling, but the actual seeing upon which, in other words, without the seeing, there's no seen object, right? The seeing itself as an experience, you do not see objects. You could say, for example, I mean, if you get a little bit closer to what you're seeing, you might say you see light that looks like a ceiling. But even that is too much description because you can't say what light is. We're why this kind of investigation is can be challenging is that our sense of already knowing what this is it's so in a sense locked in. There's so much certainty at one level that we know what we're seeing because we've learned we have knowledge of what things are. And this experiential inquiry upends that and reveals another perspective, which is the absolute unknown, unresolvable mystery of what's being perceived. We'll continue to explore this because I mean you're right at the very heart of what I'm talking about. So it's a very good question. Cade, did you want to share something or ask something?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for taking my question and thanks for doing this group. And hello, everyone. I like how you talk about inside and outside. And I've noticed that the realization I've had is that there's no distance that I seem to travel. For example, I'm instantly in my hands or my feet, and I don't have to travel up my leg and into my hand, right? Uh, However, it's been the inside and outside concept I can see is conceptual, but it still feels very concrete in the sense that like the the external through the eyes or through the ears feel out there, whereas my hands and my feet feel in here. And it's kind of what you're talking with Ed about. So I just wanted to make a comment about that.
Yeah,
And
I
you
mean,
were talking about it.
and that right there, I mean, it's great. That what we don't realize is when we say what you said very understandably, like when you go back and it's like there is a world out there and it's outside, you know, it's like that world that we think of as outside of us is known as experience. And then there's a inference that there's a thing out there that's separate from us. But as experience, I mean, the experiential perspective is so radical, it's so radically other than what we think. It's hard to convey this until you start to like taste it in these kinds of investigations, that there's no space in experience actually. Because it's like there's another chapter, I think it's something like 0 degrees of separation. And it's like because space is that I'm here and you're there, and there's a something between us. That's the spatiality of like that's a perspective that we know very well. And the world, mind you, the world shows up spatial. It shows up as three-dimensional, right? Or multi-dimensional. And yet experientially, it's like a 0 point. It's like, okay, so here's I'm just going to feel what I call here. Okay. It's here. Okay. Now I'm going to feel there. I'm going to, where does the experience of there occur? It occurs here, wherever that is. Where's the distinction between here and there? Experientially. It's like the whole world disappears.
Yeah.
It's like there's no world at all. There's no, it's a, some tradition talk about the pointless point. There's no point there. There's no dimensionality. And yet, out of that pointless point of no space shines forth an entire world of spatiality, right?
It's
It's
incredible.
absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
It's stunning. But this, as the chapter will go on and the book goes on to talk about, like, um, there's a whole set of, we could say, for the human, like, because one might fairly ask, why even, I don't need to discover this lack of space and time. Like, what's the point, you know? Like, I can just go about living my life and imagining there's space and time, right? Which is fine. But we're seem to be a curious lot of folks who are wanting to find out like what's really going on here. Let's not assume that we already know, and let's look. And it turns out that there's a chapter, for example, that talks about the perspective of invulnerability. I can't remember the title of it, and that feeling of experiencing itself, where there's no inside and outside, there's no self or other. There's just experience, the continuum of experience. What's the felt sense of that like? The felt sense of that is absolute intimacy, absolute undefended, no defense, no need to protect. There's nothing to be protected from. There's no one to be protected. There's no threat because there's no other. There's no threat because there's no one who could be threatened. I mean, I could go on and on and on as I do in the book. What the kind of felt implications are, we could say, of this indescribable experiential perspective. It's so different. It's so different. It I mean, another one I highlight a lot in many of the chapters is how what we think of as things that need to be dealt with and navigated and solved and resolved and fixed and avoided and grasped after and on and on and on and on. From the experiential perspective, there's no things. Do you see? None. Oh, wow. That's really an interesting way to experience reality, like the no thingness of it. And yet it's not a nothingness. It's absolute fullness and richness and aliveness. It's just not a thing. And there's no separation in that. So again, I'm just sort of talking a little bit about the why of this inquiry. We could say from a human standpoint, it just feels entirely different from for our, way to encounter reality.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing.
Yeah.
As you point, I'm realizing that I've been experiencing this the whole time.
Yes,
Like
you have.
nothing is different than it's ever been. Yet
Exactly.
it's just
That's
a
right.
new perspective.
It's just like, oh, I'm noticing something that was just being overlooked because the kind of collective, it would seem, human conditioning is so strongly towards towards the describable perspective that what's that line? In one sense, we're learning to see again as we still are seeing, but not noticing as a child does.
Yeah.
And that's that complete, like, there's no division, there's no categories yet, there's no knowledge. There's just, and we're doing this without, like, some of these psychedelics. We're just learning about how what they seem to be doing, say, to the brain or to consciousness. And one of the ways I think there's some supportive evidence for this scientifically that some of those substances are sort of suppressing the interpretations. It becomes in certain cases almost impossible to see anything described. And then you're just left with the indescribable. So it's
Mm.
kind of working by suppressing. So it's like I know some people, I haven't done any psychedelics for, I don't know, 40 plus years. So I don't know what I'm talking about in one sense, um, but I know people who have and still do. And it's like, I have this one friend well, he's very out about how much he explores psychedelics or has, and he's interviewed me on his podcast a number of times. And he was telling me about a trip he had on this very powerful substance, MEO DMT, and it was like, whatever. And you take the thing, and then like in 2 minutes later, like he said, you're just seeing nothing but this undivided, like white, light or whatever. And it's just pure divinity. And it's like, and I said, well, is that very functional? Like, can you actually operate in the world? He goes, no, not at all. So I'm like, I said, well, what you saw on that trip is exactly what you're seeing right now. You're seeing the undivided reality. And this is what you're pointing out. It's like it is here,
Yeah.
inseparable from the divided reality, inseparable from um, the world of form. You don't have to eradicate the world of form to see the formless. You don't have to eradicate the descriptions to see the indescribable. And what I love about kind of approaching it in this way, without any sort of need to suppress any of those mechanisms through whatever intensive meditation or drugs or whatever, it's like it's right here. Just look. It's just a matter of what we're orienting to, because I could look and see there's no division, there's no separation, there's no inside and outside. And then I can just flip over to the described world, which I have complete access to. And it's very adaptive to have access to that perspective, isn't it? So I don't crash into walls and I can talk to other people and, you know, but there are no other people from another perspective and there's no wall. So, yeah.
You pull out all the labels, and reality already is psychedelic. Like it's the
It is.
psychedelic experience
Yeah.
happening right now.
I sometimes joke with my graduate students when I talk a little bit about the psychedelic research because it's emerging in the field of psychology and it touches upon some of the things that I'm talking about in my work in terms of what these inquiries can open up in terms of a discovery of a way of perceiving that's distinct from what we're used to. And as I get really carried away, as I do sometimes talking to them, I'll just stop and I go, and this is why Dr. Assen doesn't take drugs. And they all laugh because they go, this guy sounds like he's whack. Yeah, thanks, Kate.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hey, Dennis. This is why it would take like how many years to get through the entirety of the book. I've read like half a page so far. So go ahead. It's all good.
Well, for me, what I'm noticing is that the word experience, I have to give up what I have defined as experience to look deeper into the experience that you're talking about. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a whole new dimension of experience that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's taken me a little while. Oh, I have an experience of seeing, I have an experience of feeling the chair.
Right.
But it's like stepping back
Yeah.
for me when you say, look, stepping back into spaciousness.
Yeah.
Um,
Or Dennis, try this. Instead of you're not stepping into anything, you're noticing that you're not merely having an experience of a chair or an experience of a room. You're having an experience of experience.
okay. Um,
So don't apply any, in other words, don't apply any label to it at all, other than
okay.
You're experiencing what's here, what's present, and then let what's present show you what it is, rather than us telling it what it is with our interpretations. Oh, it's a room. Really? What if it's not? What if it's God?
Right.
What if it's the
Well,
whole
and then
universe?
it's also like this. I mean, when you sort of addressed it earlier, and it's like, okay, now what? It's sort of like,
Hmm.
okay. Um, and of course, for me, I get, how do I say, just become more aware of presence without it having a focus of, I mean, I don't know how to talk about it without somehow defining it in some way, knowing that any definition that I give to it probably will be invalid tomorrow or in the next minute. Um,
Yes. No, that's
um,
part of the challenge of talking about this. It's
right.
you
So,
know, I'll,
I don't
I'll
know.
point to some of these qualities like that you can't find division, you can't find seams in the fabric of experiencing, kind of almost resorting to a poetry to capture. I mean, it's obviously not that. Like it's beyond that. It's beyond any way I could characterize it because, well, it's
But I'm also
yeah,
seeing
it
without
just
this
is.
experience that we're looking, there wouldn't be any other experiences either.
Say that again.
If this looking where there's no top to the experience, no top bottom experience, it's just another way you might say it's just presence. Uh, but without that, there wouldn't be the presence of seeing or the story of the walls or the story of the
Right.
floor, whatever.
That's what I mean by getting back to first principles. It's like, we could be going on and on and on about all the elaborate ways we think about reality or think about life or existence and what it means and where am I headed and will I be okay and how is this related to that, all of which is fine. But it's way, way downstream from what's more basic or fundamental, which is that there even is something called life, something called presence, whatever, those are synonyms to me. There's something here. Let's start there and let's find out what it is. And
It's
to
sort
do
of
that,
like
let's really find out what it is. Yeah.
rather than thinking about it's sort of like giving up being hypnotized by the wall, the ceiling.
Right.
I mean, hypnotized is like dealing in what I can describe and
Yes,
thinking what I can describe is reality.
exactly. That's exactly. And we've there's a what the psychologists call fusion, happens where the thoughts are we actually think reality is what we think it is. We believe that it is what we think it is. So it's so smeared together that you really think you're in a room. But that's half the story at best of where you actually are. From another perspective, from the experiential perspective, what this chapter is about and the book is about, you're in an infinite, fathomless, ever-changing, ungraspable universe, infinity. That's where you are. I mean, how different is that than just, I'm just sitting in my room? Really? No. You not only are you in an infinite, unresolvable, ever-changing, kaleidoscopic. I mean, right. You can see the challenge of words, right? But let's just say, not only are you in that, but you are that. So it's like, how different is that than feeling like um, I'm just this mortal creature, like that's vulnerable and subject to. I mean, I am that too, it would seem. But
Well, it's sort of like being hypnotized into believing that I'm a body.
yeah,
Uh, and even where does that show up in experience? But I've been so hypnotized by the sense of separation, or another word I would say it, or the drama of my life.
Yeah.
Uh,
And the dramas of life are rest upon these basic assumptions
yeah,
that there are things interacting with other things, and there's the drama, and sometimes
right.
that, and it's beautiful in its own, I mean, it's part of this reality. It's the way the reality shows up. It doesn't only show up as this undivided no thingness. It shows up as a whole complex world, doesn't it? So it's both. It's just I'm emphasizing one side of it, obviously, because we're really unfamiliar with it. So much so that, some people would think this guy's crazy to be talking like this. Like, what is he talking about? There's no inside or outside. There's no person. There's no world. It's like, but we can feel the way in which what we call the person is this fathomless, unbounded mystery, isn't it? That never, um, I'm just looking at the chat. I'm chained by habit. It's like, it seems like we are, but I mean, I'll keep pointing this out because it's worthwhile pointing out is that, you know, question everything. Like even the notion of habit, something that keeps repeating, right? From the perspective of experience itself, there's no habits because nothing repeats. I think it's the third chapter, which I was also going to read, but obviously not going to get to that. Um, uh, it's called Finding Freedom in the Freshness of Every Moment. It's like the moment is completely fresh. It's never been here before. So experientially, you can see the way that is so. It's not a repeat. Nothing's repeating. Everything's unique in every flash instant. So what does that mean about habit? To talk about habits, we have to simplify this ever-changing thing as a way of saying, well, yeah, a habit. I seem to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. Emphasis on seem. And it has a certain kind of validity. Like I have my habits. I brush my teeth the way that I tend to brush them, or comb my hair in a certain way, or eat certain ways, and exercise in certain ways, and right? And host Zoom meetings in certain ways that are, you could say, are habitual. But you think like, oh, well, I've started like every Sunday, I start off in a similar way. It's a kind of a habit. But what to say that it's similar is to overlook all the ways that it's not exactly the same, right?
Well,
So
again, it's that like
emphasize, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, again, it's like we're hypnotized.
Yeah,
I
we're
like the word.
hypnotized by the descriptions.
Yes, I mean
And
it's
the,
just
and the
like
descri- and
it's
the
like,
descriptions are oversimplifications of what's going on.
and you're talking about almost being in a room of mirrors. I mean, going to the carnival in the room of mirrors or a kaleidoscope. That I mean, you could say it's a habit that those glasses are all changing, but every instant that it's different.
I remember a conversation you and I had recently where you were really feeling that, if I'm remembering this
Right,
correctly.
right.
And you were noticing how, wow, it's like the experience of being in the room that I think of as has a certain kind of stability to it and permanence. As it's like, am I sitting in the same room? Are you sitting in the same room that you were sitting in at the 40 minutes ago?
No,
No. Not from from the experience, from the describable side of the coin. Yeah, it's got a kind of
yeah.
permanence to it,
Well,
right?
see,
It's the
that's
same
another
bloody
thing. It's
room.
like the two aspects of it existing at the same time.
Yes,
I can have in one aspect of it, I can say I have this habits that we're talking about. But
right.
in another aspect of it, no, there's no habits. It's all happening for the first time.
That's right.
And that's sort of mind blowing. And
Yes, it is.
and uh
It is indeed mind-blowing
and
and freeing.
to me it's I don't know, it's sort of like marinating in both at the same time. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
and then we sometimes they'll be more focused on
Mhm.
the room, the walls of things, but then being able at any moment to know that it's more than that.
Indeed, it is much more than that.
And this conversation is much more than just having a conversation.
Every conversation is much more. Thanks,
Thank
Stan.
you.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, John, and hi, everyone
Good to
else.
see you.
Good to see you too. You look very joyful today. No, you're laughing a lot. Yeah, I have I just thought the whole day, and this is a simple question: what do you think it is that is being conditioned? Because we're talking a lot. I mean, that requires a lot of pre-assumptions to say we are conditioned, we are hypnotized, and
Yeah,
stuff
no,
like that. And
absolutely. It's a
comfortable,
way.
you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can't really say that either because and this is again the radical nature of this discovery, which is all the things we think of, say, in a spiritual, psycho-spiritual kind of languaging of all of this and what we're sort of getting beyond. We're getting beyond conditioning or beyond identification and beyond interpretation. When you look at
But
experience,
that's how you could be criticized a lot. You know, that's one of the difficulties, I think, when you speak with ordinary folks about these
no,
topics, that you say the mind has this tendency to do this and that, and there comes probably a very simple naive question: what do you mean by mind? And then it's like,
yeah.
yeah, well, you know.
No, I know when in my previous book, This Extraordinary Moment, and I was working with a publisher. I had a publisher initially around the title, and they came up with this subtitle, and I really resisted it. It was called the title was This Extraordinary Moment, and then the subtitle they came up was "Em- Overcoming the Mind to Embrace the Miracle of What Is" or something like that. And I was like, oh man, it's like just as you said, it's like there's no mind to overcome. So it felt like the subtitle was misleading. I finally relented and went with it because, in one sense, it's like a reorientation from that usual, if you will, way of orienting to the interpretations and believing those to be true. So, in one sense, overcoming the mind kind of is descriptive or captures a little bit of what I'm talking about, but ultimately, as I say, the freedom is the discovery that it's one way to characterize a discovery that there's no such thing as bondage, because that's been defined into existence. That everything has been defined into existence because from the perspective of, and we'll explore this, and there's countless chapters in the book that explore the instability of this experientially, and why that's so powerful to see is that to me it's a very simple but potent way to upend the descriptions and to see that they don't hold water because the ability to describe the moment rests upon there being something here to describe, right? And if it's radically unstable, which you can feel the way the moment has no stability, it's slipping away. That's a good definition
Yeah,
of the
did
moment.
you one of my probably major problems? Sorry for interrupting,
No,
but
no, go
you
ahead.
touched on a topic which sometimes it's hard to grasp how to phrase certain questions. You probably go through something, but it's not so easy to, at least for
Mhm.
me. You seem to be good at it, but I encounter like fear. I think I was just lying awake from 3 a.m. this night, and I guess I went through several hours of mm, not like very strong fear, but a subtle fear, to let go of the descriptions. Did you ever encounter something like that? Because it feels like, you yeah, you have to let it kind of like probably feels a bit like on psychedelics, when but there it's you can trick yourself into it's just momentarily, just let go. But to let go, like, yeah, I'm probably scared to lose my functionality if I surrender too deeply to not knowing. Does that make any sense? Did you ever
Yeah, yeah,
encounter
no, it makes
fear?
it makes total sense. And one thing I can say is that again, why I like this kind of natural, if you will, sort of approach to this discovery is that you get to have both. I mean, you're
Mm,
to whatever extent you are functional in your life, let's just say you have some kind of functionality. You're afraid you might
Can
lose
argue
that
about
function.
that.
Okay, you're right. It's debatable maybe, but let's just say you can live your life and you take care of things and whatever. Well, you're already functional and you're already, in other words, the functionality. I mean, let's look at something very basic, like a kind of functionality, like getting up, walking to the toilet, and going to the bathroom. Like that's kind of a basic functionality. Like I can do that. Or pouring myself a glass of water, finding the glass in the first place, finding the water, putting the water in the glass, and then drinking it, right? If I don't do that as an organism, I'm going to die. Like, so it's pretty functionally important. I feel as if I know what all of that is, which enables me in one sense to do that, like we could say. But I'm actually doing those things or they're being done, and I have no idea how they're being done, actually. I have no actual knowledge of how to do that in a profound sense. I have no real knowledge of
Absolutely.
what
We
any of,
don't know how to move our hand,
no,
basically. We
I
don't know how
don't.
to do it.
I don't.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know how to move my hand.
absolutely.
But I do in another sense. I just do it. I just know how to do. So this functionality is like built into reality itself. And it's very clear we can see all the ways in which we're functional without the functionality is completely outside of any obvious conscious doing or knowing, right? Even like how to drive a car, it's very
In
like,
certain, let's say in certain fields, it touches on
yeah,
another topic which you are fond of. No, I'm sorry if I'm jumping too much, but
no, it's okay.
um, yeah, yeah. Let's take music, for example,
Yeah,
because yeah, I have a good friend who has like he has a unique piano course where he basically says like, he wants to teach you to play piano purely from, mm, yeah, from
not knowing.
yeah, kind of
Yeah,
like exactly,
yeah,
and I struggle heavily with it in a way. And
sure.
since you are a musician, I thought this is. I wasn't sure if there would be a chance today, but if you are willed to, because I think that's very, like music is a very good thing because it is somehow capable, I think, to lead us into this non-descriptive world. I
Yeah,
think it can open this non-descriptive world very, yeah, effectively on a non-verbal level, and we
sure.
are used probably to let go and in regards to music. So
Right.
how would you
I,
say,
I
like,
I think I think it is the
music
case.
knowledge, because I think to a
Yeah.
certain degree it is necessary to get external, let's call it like this, like knowledge to be capable of playing an instrument in a yeah, virtuous way. So
Yeah. I mean, just to come back to your original sort of question or concern about functionality and like the fear of like losing something by diving into the unknowable, the mystery of this. It's like you get to have your cake and eat it too. Like you can realize there's no identity, there's no division, there's no individual here, and you don't lose your individuality either, not in my experience, because it's still
hmm.
here. Like here it is, and yet I can't find it.
Do you experience yourself as a center?
I can.
But you can't tune out in a way, you can't space out. Would you say that, or would
Can
you
or
agree?
cannot.
You can. I'm asking if you can.
Yes,
Can you space out
sure.
and experience yourself non-centered, non-centered?
Yeah, right now there's no center here.
Hmm.
Where's the center of this moment? Just look. There's no center.
Yeah,
What,
yeah.
right? So we can look and see, like just do it right now. Doesn't take 30 years on a meditation cushion. There's no feel right now, the field of your experience, what's here. Forget about what you're calling it. There's the presence of the moment. And is there anything at the center of it? Or here's experience. The only thing that's at the center of it is more experience. So there's no center. There's no, here's a circle of your experience, and then there's nothing at the center. But I can just flip the kaleidoscope and go, no, I'm at the center. Like there's an individual navigating a world of experience. Like that's a valid kind of perspective. Like here I am, like moving through space, something called space with my arms. And it's like, and then as I'm doing that, I can also feel how There's no center here. There's no space. There's no person moving through space. There's just this. They're both there. There's no contradiction, even though they're wildly different. Yeah.
It's widely contradicted. But in a
Yeah.
way, I think, yeah, that
So
uh,
play,
yeah,
play with it, and yeah, yeah. But I
I have a
understand.
tendency to take things too seriously, and but if it's not too asked too much, could we still touch a little bit on the topic of music if it's not asked too much?
Oh
Otherwise, I
yeah, I mean,
cannot.
yeah. I don't want to go off on a tangent too much right now, but just yeah. I mean, I would say that certain art forms are lean more in the direction of non-conceptuality in such a way that they can be powerful doorways for us into exploring the world beyond concepts, to be sure. Maybe that's part of the appeal of music for people. It seems like almost like a universal appeal that music has. Um, but ultimately, from my standpoint, I mean, you can explore this exploration that I'm inviting is about exploring the whole of your experience, but you can look anywhere to discover its vast indescribability, its non-conceptual, unresolvable nature. But if certain circumstances or kinds of situations or experiences seem like they help to support that exploration, whether that's music or anything else, dance or art or lovemaking or whatever. It's like sure, but the key to see is that the way this is this transcendental nature of reality is not it's not more transcendental in music than in a business meeting. That's a fantasy.
No, 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 no. I
Yeah,
would, yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
if you
yeah.
got
Just
that,
just to
then
be clear, yeah,
expressed myself wrong. No, no,
yeah,
that's not
yeah,
what I meant. Yeah, but
yeah,
it can be a gateway probably to.
yeah.
That's what I meant.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
To realize that the business meeting is as
yeah.
transcendental as
But the
what I
beauty, the
mean.
beauty of life is one of its beauties is that everything is a doorway into the same discovery. So go anywhere. Look at any moment and you discover the same thing ultimately.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot, John.
Thanks, Jonathan. Let me carry on a little bit and read some more. But thanks for all the great questions. In the seemingly describable world, there's time. There's what we call the past, what is the present, and what might be the future. But this is all conceived. Again, I'm not saying that what we call the flow of time doesn't exist in some sense. However, at what point does the so-called past end and the present begin, or the present end and the future begin? We can use those designations to describe and talk about the nature of things, but experientially, there are no findable gaps. So I can talk about a past, that's what happened before. I can talk about the present, what's happening, quote unquote, now, and then what might happen in the future, right? We have those ideas, we have those categories, past, present, and future. Experientially, do you find something called a past, a present, and future? No, you do not. You don't find any dividing lines, do you? The experience is outside of time in that sense, transcends time inherently. When we talk about the categories of past, present, and future, we're talking about things that cannot be found in experience. Take what we call the present moment. I mean, how many books have been written about getting into the present moment, the power of now, for example, probably the most famous book. We hear teachings talking about entering the now, this point in time that is neither past nor future. But exactly how long is this point, this sliver of time that's presumably sandwiched between what was and what might be? Precisely how small is this pinpoint of now? That's an experiential question, as are all of these. This flash instant we call the moment. Feel that flash instant now. How long is it here for? Experientially. Can you grasp hold of it experientially? So here's a little metaphor that came to me one day that I wrote about here regarding this. Imagine a train that's approaching the track where you're standing. So there you are, you're on the track, the train's coming. Even though this particular train is not going to stop at the exact location where you're standing, you would say that at a certain point the train will be lined up with where you're standing, right? It's the train's coming, 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 and you're here. And at some point there's going to be a meeting point where you're standing when the train that this moving train arrives at where you are, right? But does it ever arrive at that place where you are? Or is the arrival of the moving train, here's the train, here I am. I don't know if I can illustrate. Here's the train coming. Standing on the tracks. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So here it gets to me. Oh, there, right there. It's arrived, but it's not stopping, is it? Does it arrive at the place where you are, or is the arrival of the moving train simultaneously its departure? It finally got to me, the train. Oh, wait, now it's leaving. But it's not like it gets there and then it leaves. The getting there is the leaving. You see how trippy that is experientially? There you are. The train is approaching, 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 and then it arrives where you are. But since the train doesn't come to a stop, what we would call its arrival is literally its departure. The moving train is an apt metaphor for what we think of as the passage of time. The appearance of the moment is at the same time its disappearance. We can and do talk about the moments of life as if they were something identifiable and describable. That's the whole seemingly describable world is based on there's something here that I can describe, right? Okay, I want you to describe what's here. Okay, let me give it a try, right? And then we're off to the races of description. But what's appearing is just like the metaphoric train. You're there, you're on the tracks, waiting for the moving train of the moment to arrive. But the instant you imagine the train has arrived, it's leaving because reality never stops. Now, let yourself wrap your head around this. Because reality never stops, it's never actually here. It seems like it, right? Because here, what are you talking about? Here's the moment. It's here. Now, okay, there's the vivid appearance, as they say in Dzogchen. The vivid appearance. No denying that. It's vivid. And here it is appearing. But it's dynamism, it's aliveness, it's movement of no pause button, no stop button. It's arising, it's appearing. And in its appearing, in its dynamism, apparent dynamism, it's here for no time, which is why you can't find it. You cannot put your finger on it. You can't grasp hold of it and say, this is what it is, this is the way it is. And that's why the seemingly describable world goes up in flames when you look at experience. Does that make sense? In the described world, there are people, places, things, circumstances, and events that seem to endure and have some kind of object permanence to them. There are countless things in our life, homes, friends, family, and so on, that are recognizable to us. I mean, I recognize many, many of you. I've known you through these meetings, right? You're familiar to me. The coffee shop I'm sitting in right now is familiar to me, where I was writing this chapter, apparently. I have the sense that I've been here countless times before, and that when I step outside of the building, it will remain the essentially unchanging object that it is. And when I come back here, it will still be here, the coffee shop, right? This sense of familiarity and the belief that what I'm experiencing now, what I call Pete's coffee shop, is the same coffee shop I visited many times before. The sense of things enduring over time is a very real perspective, one that's more or less our default mode. However, experientially, there is no permanence. There are no things that endure over time since experience never holds still. If you were my friend and I ran into you, there would be that sense of familiarity, that belief that I know who you are, right? And in one sense, that's true. Like I've never met Pat in person, but I've known Pat now in these Zoom meetings. Or take Arlene, who I have met in person. I've known her. We met in person several times. Um, so she's familiar to me. You're both familiar to me. Um, but as I go on here, if you were my friend and I ran into you, there would be that sense of familiarity as it would be with the two of you. That belief that I know who you are. And in one sense, that's true. But the perception I'm having when we cross paths is not the same as the perception I had the last time we met. I'm having the perception I'm having when we cross paths is not the same as the perception I had the last time we met, even if that was 1 second ago. For experience is changing in every instant. It has no permanence. You see? Experientially speaking, what we think of as phenomena have no identifiable form, owing to the ever-changing, shape-shifting nature of perception. The reality is that there are no fixed shapes, but only ever this constant shaping, right? Because as the moment takes shape, and there's the shape of the moment, the form of the moment that I seem able to identify and describe, if I'm with it in real time, this is what I mean by the experiential to my conversation with Ed, like feeling your experience is feeling the actuality of what's happening. There's an idea of something enduring over time, but when you feel your experience, when you feel what's actually present, you do not feel something enduring, do you? You feel this dynamism, this flow, this unstoppable transformation, morphing. Nothing that arises experientially has any permanence or endurance. The moment is that ungraspable, and yet things appear to endure, which is how the seemingly describable world is born. I'm not denying that perspective. I live that perspective as well, which is how I can schedule a Zoom meeting and write a book and talk about the book and all this stuff. I mean, we get to play with all this stuff, all the seeming objects of the world. And it's quite something, the the describable world. I love it, you know. I mean, can it also drive us batty and be a source of discomfort and challenge and difficulty and vulnerability? Yeah, it's that too. It's just not the only reality. We imagine ourselves, apropos what I just said, we imagine ourselves to be these individuals navigating this complex world that we often struggle to make sense of or keep ourselves safe from. Anyone never have that experience? This complex world that we often struggle to make sense of or keep ourselves safe from, a world in which we try to fend off the threats to our well-being that present themselves at every turn. I mean, why else would we try to micromanage our experience in order to be okay, right? Why are we doing that? Because we think our experiences are a threat that needs to be different than they are. But this whole world that supposedly exists outside of us and that we are seemingly subject to, which I would say includes the subjective world, so-called, is not what's being experienced, actually. I'm not merely experiencing being an individual navigating a complex world. I'm feeling a flow of experiencing that has no boundary, no edges, no clear lines of demarcation or separation. From the perspective of the seemingly describable world, arises the sense of being someone who's trying to find safety, fulfillment, and so on. But from the experiential perspective, none of that can be found. We don't find an individual trying to ward off or resolve problems. We find, again, a flow of experiencing, open-ended, boundless, seamless, and ultimately indescribable. Try right now to think about the moment. Go ahead, try to think about the moment. Try to conceive what's here. And as you do so, notice that whatever it is you've attempted to think about is gone before you can even try to conceive it, right? It's already gone. Tricky little thing, isn't it? This reality. Reality is that unthinkable. The very famous physicist Werner Heisenberg said, not only is the world stranger than we think, it's stranger than we can think. The whole idea of being an individual who's lacking something and who then must go on a search to find whatever it is that's presumably missing just doesn't compute from the experiential perspective, where there is no separate someone looking for, nor a separate thing to be found. There's simply the absolute boundless reality of experiencing, infinite in the sense of having no end or final conclusion. What's here experientially,
Oh, God.
um, that was cute. Sometimes when somebody's unmuted, the best thing comes out. um, what's here experientially is an undivided wholeness, a fullness beyond measure. It's not some empty void. It's full beyond measure because true as it is that when you go to look for what this is, you don't find it, right? Because of its dynamism. From another perspective, you keep finding something, but it morphs into something else and morphs into something else. So it's like there's nothing there except this endless flow, this of richness, of seeming qualities and textures and flavors, and but um, it's almost like reality is like suggestive of being something, and it's strongly suggestive of you feel afraid. It's strongly suggestive of being something, isn't it? The sense of fear, very strongly suggestive. Or you feel pain, strongly suggested, strongly suggestive of something being there, or joy. But when you're with it in real time, this experiential perspective that I'm opening up in this chapter, you find something else. You find the unfindable. You find the infinite nature of it. We find a fullness beyond measure. Whatever we imagine ourselves to be is also that fullness. You are this fathomless richness and fullness. For there's no separation between you and the fathomless nature of reality. Like that's what you are to the core, to the coreless core. There's just this wholeness, no top, no bottom, no inside, no outside, no here, no there, no before, no after. The experiential basis of every instant is this fathomless, boundless indescribability. This is what I think Cade said this, wow, this is what we're experiencing like already, right? This is what we're experiencing right now and what we've always been experiencing. And it's not a special state. to get ourselves into. It's just our ordinary perception, so-called ordinary moment. The moments of our lives are this, everything is a doorway into just that infinity, that boundlessness, that ungraspable flow, right? It just won't be concretized, will it? You can't make the infinity finite because it's infinite. It never becomes something finite. It seems to. But that which appears as finite is fundamentally not. That which appears definable is fundamentally not. That which appears to be identifiable and resolved turns out to be unfindable and unresolvable when we look just at our normal, if you will, everyday experience. Nothing special per se, but the most special thing because it's the miracle of existence, the very basis of everything. Hi, Ted.
I um, so this business about the power of now, it seems like I mean, as opposed to like thinking about the future or thinking about the past, just being here, being present, being here now, and sensing into what's here is more in touch with reality. It's more alive. It's more it's more relaxing in a way. It's more so there's positive benefits to
Mhm.
paying attention to
Sure.
what's
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
so I think Eckhart Tolle is definitely a good spiritual teacher in my mind. And and then the discovery that everything is already now anyway. It's there is no future, there is no past. You're just imagining that, um,
Hmm.
and then it leads you to the inquiry of what is here now. Um, and then you start to see how everything is changing. And so I'm just commenting that paying attention to now is a valuable thing
Sure.
in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's sort of like um, per that chapter I was just reading, all of that, there being a past, a present, a future, and a present that we can get ourselves sort of into, and it's powerful to do that, and it's more beneficial than ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. And it's more, like you say, it's more real, it's here.
Mhm.
that all exists in a way within the seemingly describable world, and within that world is arguably more beneficial, and it's great as far as it goes. As it is with so many kind of spiritual sort of ways of languaging things, and also practices like being more present and being more aware and so on, um, being more accepting. These things have value again within a certain narrower frame of reference. But what's really powerful to me, more powerful, is to discover that those same, in one sense, there's another version of the power of now, or another version of awareness, or awake awareness, or whatever, that doesn't have an opposite actually. That doesn't, it's not ever absent. It isn't something we can locate, get better at staying in, and then possibly lose. It's just we could just say the power of now. Okay, let's stay with that. All there is the power of now, period, end of story. Nothing else exists. There's no absence of now. There's no disempowered moment. There's simply the power of now, the potency of this that's here, period.
Mhm.
That's a different, I don't know. It's been a long time since I read that book, but I wonder if what I just said appears anywhere in that book, that other vantage point. It's a very, very different way of approaching it, which is to come to see that that's the only thing that exists, right? Is the power of now, the potency of this reality shining forth in the immediacy, because there's no other place that it shines forth other than here, right? Right in this
Mhm.
instant. And it is powerful in the sense of it's the very force of reality itself. And what could be more powerful, right? So in that sense, yeah, the power of now. Um, that's what we have. That's what we are. And you see, it's a different sort of perspective on it. That it's not to say the other perspective doesn't have its own value. Um, it's a little flimsier, or a lot more flimsy, and seems like it depends upon whether I'm paying attention to the now, or resting in the now, or um, and it's like we are the power of now. Well, that has a different feel to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, in my, I'm going along with my life and I am paying attention to this, I'm paying attention to that. I'm thinking about some new thing that I want to research. I'm wondering what's going to play out in Ukraine. I'm just going along with my life. And there's always this sort of in the back of my mind, well, I do have choices of what to pay attention to. And um, so it seems like I don't know who's making the choice or whatever, but there's certain things to pay attention to that cause less suffering than other things, and certain things seem more closer to God or to pay attention to. And so I'm just um, navigating this where do we put our attention kind of thing, which I think you're doing in your own way. You're saying, look, if you pay attention to look in your own experience, you're paying attention to your own experience and you're looking for a certain thing, and so yeah, what's your comment on what do we do with our uh, seeming choice about what to pay attention to?
Well, from the standpoint of how I'm talking about all of this and what I'm pointing to, I would say it doesn't matter where you put your attention. Instead, just look at wherever attention goes, look at what's actually there, wherever it goes. It could go into
Yeah,
thought, it could go into fantasy, it could go into worry, it could go into paying attention to the senses or watching the breath, or it's like wherever it goes, look at what it is. I mean, that's what that chapter was inviting, is what's actually there. There, wherever attention is landed, go ahead and explore what's there. Become familiar with its one of the qualities that I was highlighting and do highlight because it's a powerful a one and a liberating one to come to appreciate, which is what's here that I seem able to label and describe and render in one sense and reify as something, including a present moment, turns out to be a completely elusive shapeshifter. And that's true wherever my attention lands, I find that same thing. And one of the things that I highlight in a couple of the chapters of the book, what I call the equalness of everything, that from the perspective I'm talking about, there's no hierarchy of experience in the sense of better or worse, or higher or lower, or more awake or not awake, or more God or not God. It's non-hierarchical in the sense of all of it is this. All of it is, as I said, the power of now, the potency of reality, the shine of the divinity, all of it. And that's what I mean, where you place your attention is like, and that's a really powerful kind of meditation of sorts, is like notice that wherever you go in the field of awareness or the field of consciousness, or wherever consciousness travels, I should say, in the field of experience, it always finds the same thing, actually. It finds nothing but difference and distinction, all the flavors that it encounters. But fundamentally, it's finding what? It's finding this boundless presence of existence, this boundless, fathomless presence of life,
Which is always changing
which is always changing, but always paradoxically is always itself, even though it's always changing.
Hmm,
It's always reality.
that's the damnedest thing.
It is the damnedest thing. But again, my friend the ocean, as a metaphor, is a beautiful one here as well, because the ocean's always changing, but it always remains itself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is why another powerful meditation that the book has some invitations into is that you don't have to change your experience to discover this, because of all of your experience is the same reality. So getting yourself into a better state is like maybe a fun pastime and nothing wrong with it. But no particular state is closer to the ground of being, the ground of divinity, the presence of life, because all of them are life's expression. So you can relax and notice that all of your experience is this movement of reality. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks, Ted. Hey, Pat.
Hey, John. Hi. How are you?
Very well. Very happy to be here with all of you.
Yeah. So, just to put it in a little context, I've been immersing myself in these studies for a short while now. Uh, Yours and Peter's and
Hmm.
Dina's work.
Hmm.
And it occurred to me the other day that there's so many different facets. I mean, we could say there's infinite amount of facets as to how this shows up.
Hmm.
And just personally speaking this morning,
Hmm.
because it would seem that maybe you talked a lot about the dynamic nature of this. And for some reason, for me this morning, it's making me dizzy, man. All this dynamism, it's just got my head spinning. And for me, when it happens like that, too many big words, too many concepts, it's just I want to just come back to like I don't want to say the now, but I just want to come back to the presence, or in your vernacular, what my experience is. That that part of it that is always present, that always is here, despite the fact that it's morphing
Yeah.
every second. It's always shifting back to your metaphor, ocean and waves.
Yeah.
When my head is spinning, I really need to immerse myself in the sea part of it. I
Yeah.
don't want to like keep surfing waves.
It's
So
very
I just
interesting.
want to,
It's very interesting though, because um, I understand what you mean, and thanks for sharing that. It's like And then there's several chapters that bring that other side of the paradox into try to bring it into clear view, that despite one way to describe the present moment is that it's all already gone. But it's curious because there is this sense of something always being here. What is that? Well, there's no word for it. We could call it the presence of what is. It's like that's always here. And but even when we touch the way in which the ocean of presence is always here, it always is itself, it never departs from itself. We can simultaneously feel its ever changing, ever morphing dance, which is clear. In other words, there's no denying that movement, that dynamism, but it's very paradoxical because in one sense, because there's only one thing, this presence of what is, and it's unchangingly itself, always remains itself. In another sense, there's no movement at all. It's just pure stillness, pure unmoving presence
Right, at the heart of it, for
at the heart of
sure.
it. Yeah.
When you were reading that passage and going into the example of the
Yeah.
train's coming, it's hitting this point where you are, and then it's moving on. I was thinking the whole time, I don't see the train moving at all. It doesn't seem like anything's happening. It just felt like, well, or looked at another way, it's already here. I'm looking at the train, it's right here in my experience. It's not moving. It's so funny the different ways you can look at this. But
Well, part of, there's a lot of intentionality in those metaphors that I know you can appreciate, and it's a process of deconstruction of our frames of reference to come to see that they don't hold up under scrutiny.
right,
And a powerful one is the sense that there's something here that can be pinned down and identified, and that we know what it is. And that as dizzying as it can be, and I can appreciate that sense of like, wow, this is just slip sliding away, um, to quote Paul Simon. It's like it's slip sliding away, but it's funny because it is, I guess, from one perspective, dizzying to feel that. And yet there's another way where I don't know if you have this sense, our old friend Candace used to highlight this. Pat and I studied with another teacher years ago. Um, and she used to highlight this quality that always stuck with me because I feel it and it's powerful and this dynamism. It's like here's one way to characterize it, even though it's uncharacterizable. It's like it keeps opening. And it's a soothing, she would talk about it like a soothing flow, like one moment opening into the next effortlessly, and it opens into the next effortlessly, and it opens effortlessly, unstoppably. And that's why you see these practices like in Dzogchen of don't do anything to interrupt that flow, because that flow is what you're looking for, is the ease of that, the non-resistance of that, the effortlessness of that. And we're always wanting to try to correct the flow and make it better and improve upon it and right and try to fix it in some way. And it's like we're like just allow that feel the effortless flow of this dynamism. It's amazing, isn't it? It's just beautiful and it's just exquisite and it's unfolding, it's unstoppable. So that's another way to talk about this, maybe that is a little less dizzying and also very true to the nature of that dynamism.
yeah, that's a better way to characterize it. I think maybe for me, the dizzying part, and I just say this once, he was like talking about mindfulness approaches that, if you're constantly just looking at things, it can get kind of dizzying.
Yeah.
And I think that's one facet of just like looking at your experience constantly in a particular kind of way that it's so it can be disorienting if you're looking at it in a very conventional kind of way, like you know what it is. Some part of your experience you like, some you don't like. You want
Mhm.
it to be this way and not that way. I mean, that's exhausting, despite being kind of very busy. But yeah, you're talking about something different. I like the way you characterize it. Sky pouring into sky.
Indeed.
Thanks,
Thanks,
John.
Pat. Yeah. Um, just we're out of time, but Sheila, did you want to ask something, share something? Maybe just we could you go ahead and share it. I don't know if I can take too much time right now, but
Yeah, just a comment.
please, yeah.
Since the early 80s, my first guided meditation, I've been looking for the inside. I thought I was broke, like everybody else had an inside, and I never
Mhm.
could find it. So thank you so much. I can quit looking.
I love it. Thanks, Sheila. You're very welcome. Yeah. That insight, the gift that life keeps giving us in each instant. It's right here. Bob, did you want to share something before we sign off?
Oh yeah, briefly.
Yeah.
I came across this metaphor, a kaleidoscope.
Hmm.
Everything in life is going on all at once, all at the same time. And it's like you have like a kaleidoscope, and every time you turn it, all the elements are always there. Like everything about life could be always there, but it just changes with each nanosecond. So just threw that out there.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, reality has this feel of very kaleidoscopic, like it just, consciousness turns the kaleidoscope and suddenly it appears this way and then it appears this way and then it appears this way. And like you say, but it's this one reality. It just appears differently. All the myriad, infinite, really number of ways it can appear. And yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob. Appreciate it. Thanks to everyone. Um,
Thank you, John.
thanks, folks. Love your
Thank
questions and
you.
explanations. So look forward to seeing you all next week, and I'll get the recording out to you as soon as I can. All right. Bye for
Goodbye,
now.
everyone.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
John,
John,
and
Bye.
everyone.